I had to somewhat correct my mindset looking at Week 7's Big Ten schedule because I always just consider this one a huge one. And of course, this was the game in the Big Ten Western Division for a long, long time. Iowa, Wisconsin. And of course, important enough, according to the conference and the powers that be, to make it a permanent rivalry game. So we will slice and dice the Badgers and the Hawkeyes at Camp Randall coming up on Saturday. Corey Bratter right next to me, of course, from the Hawkeye of the Storm, talking Iowa football with each of you every Tuesday, 5 Eastern, 4 p.m., where it counts. Leave those comments, questions there in the chat. We appreciate your super chat contributions. Anything that you can do to keep us going here at the Voice of College Football, please like and subscribe as well. Check out Corey's work, of course, covering Iowa football. And basically, basketball has started to a certain extent. I know that media contingents are descending upon, I believe it's Chicago this week for Big Ten Media Days. Corey, how you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, we got Women's Basketball Media Day, Men's Basketball Media Day back-to-back next week. So, Big Ten Media Days, I guess, is this week. I won't be going to Chicago for that, but I'll be in Iowa City next week. And, it's right upon us. We got exhibition for the men later this month, for the women later this month. Secret scrimmages for the men, I believe, are taking place this month as well. So, this is a good time of year. Yesterday, at least in Iowa, it was like the first real fall day where it felt like chilly cold. And I stepped out today and it was warm. So I'm going to hang on to this as long as I can, but should be a fun one. I will not be making the trek to Madison. I've been going back and forth on this for the last several weeks because I actually had it in my plans to get up there, but and I'm not one to complain about night games. I'm going to just make that very clear. I know that's been one of the big, overwhelming narratives over the last few days with the Penn State game next week also being announced as a night game, which you got to love, Iowa, Penn State on Peacock.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. You might have to bite the bullet and just get Peacock, Mark. Like, get a free trial.
It's not the finances. It's the headache. It's just the okay. I did get a free trial. They may not allow me to get another one. Ohio State, Purdue a couple of years ago. Yeah. I got one.
Well, use a new email address and get a new free trial. But anyways, I can understand why people complain about it. That's part of the reason I'm not going to Madison, just because last time I went to Madison 2 years ago, Mark, and I did a post-game show from a local establishment after the game, but then I made the trek home. Now I got home late because it was a late afternoon kick. But we were able to make the trek back home the same day, 6 p.m. Central Time start. Game's not done till 9:30. Get on the air at 10. Even if you have a place to do a post-game show, you can't be back on the road at 1 o'clock in the morning and make a 4-hour trek home. It's just not reasonable. So you got to get a hotel. And I'm not trying to complain about that. I mean, a lot of media people, formal, traditional newspaper print type media people that need to be there in person, they'll do that. But for me, with the post-game show, I'm not going to do that. And I usually make at least 1 or 2 trips to road games during a season. And so there's a few other options on the table. That's one of the reasons why this one was a prime option, because one of the other options is at USC. So, okay, let's go to LA, I guess. I don't know that that's going to happen. And then, of course, at Nebraska, maybe that's more of a possibility. So we'll see on that. But this should be a fun game with it under the lights.
So since we brought up the TV aspect of this, and we can go right through the point spread. So Iowa's a 3.5-point favorite on the road, 37.5. That's an old Hawkeye Badger point total for sure. FS1 and game times at 6 Central.
Yep, 6 Central.
All right. So one question for you and the chat. People chime in on this one. Since basketball was mentioned, Iowa's lost 2 games in football. The women's basketball team, since when? Caitlin Clark, or did it start before then, has become a major factor on the sports scene in Iowa?
No, it was Clark. It was okay. Clark. There were people, they had some success and they went to the tournament, went to the Sweet 16 prior to Caitlin, but it was really Caitlin that turned this whole thing into a phenomenon within the state.
Not just from a winning standpoint, but from the standpoint of popularity.
Right.
Okay. I don't know what the men's team is supposed to do, if there's much excitement there.
New coaching.
My overall question basically has to do with how many people in the state of Iowa, sports fans, will slightly shift their attention just because they figure 2 games and the way the football team looked against, not that they played a bad game against Indiana, just that it's so early in the Big Ten schedule that they've lost a second overall game. And I'm not saying their season's dead by any stretch. I hold everything we talked about last week. Just it's not gotten off to the start that they would want.
In general, I don't think there's 2 losses is not enough to move any large faction of the fan base to it's time to focus on basketball mood or mode. Now, there may be people that claim that, Mark, but the reality is that's why I always find it's humorous when I bring up, well, 2 losses doesn't do them in for their big goals. It doesn't. If they ran the table, then everything is in front of them. They could still, like, literally, if they win every game from here on out, they'll win a national title. I mean, that's the reality. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying they are not eliminated, and I don't think Hawkeye football fans are too rabid, too invested. So it will take more than probably even 3 losses, because 3 losses basically eliminates them from, like, real postseason conversation. But if they get down to that 7-5 range, anything worse than 8-4, fans are really going to be frustrated at that point. The good news is this. I think this game comes at a really good time, not only because of when the bye was, but, this is a Wisconsin team that last week, Kirk Ferentz brought it up today. And they've done this, there've been certain areas of each of their games where they've been mildly impressive. I'm not saying that they're, there's a reason they're only 3.5-point dogs against this Iowa team. They're good against the run. They looked better on the offensive side with the rushing attack last week. I still think Luke Fickell is a good head football coach. I think he's in over his head there, given the circumstances. But with that being said, I think it's good timing that they're not playing a Penn State or an Oregon. Mark Gronowski's not totally healthy. Kirk said today they think he might be able to be back. Nothing definitive. If it's not Gronowski, it will likely be Hank Brown, although they also listed Jeremy Hecklinski as the co-backup to Gronowski this week. So that's indication that Hecklinski has made some movement forward and has made some headway, especially being given snaps during the bye week. I think that's the key thing, the key element here that maybe we're not taking into account enough is that, Hecklinski, you can't really give more than 2 quarterbacks a ton of snaps during game weeks throughout the season. But during a bye week, you kind of look at it like a bowl prep scenario, especially with your number 1 quarterback out. That's given Hecklinski a chance to actually gain some ground in real speed practice. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would think Brown would still be the guy. I mean, I went up 2 years ago to Madison and watched Iowa win with Deacon Hill, and they lost their best tight end at the time in Eric All to a season-ending injury. They were down all kinds of pieces, Mark, and I remember sitting there in Camp Randall thinking to myself, this is exactly what that was like not the first moment, but it was like the prototypical Kirk Ferentz game where I was just real confident they were going to win, even though you knew they were going to hit even 20 points because they controlled the field. They ran the ball well. They had no pass game, but everything they wanted to do was executed well. And, I think they had a special teams penalty here or there that could have hurt them. But in general, they controlled that game. I think it was like 15-6, if I'm not mistaken, 2 years ago.
And that was also a game where I remember I watched the game. Yes, I bloodied myself through a 15-6 game. But where you and I discussed it the next week, of course, and you actually gave a breakdown. Now, the sequence of the plays, the time of the game, and all that, I would not be able to recant. But to basically make a case that Kirk wanted to punt. He rather have had his offense just punt the ball than mess up and give the ball away to Wisconsin.
With that offense and that quarterback scenario, they were totally content. And they also had, let's not forget, they had the guy named Torrey Taylor.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's going to be the exact same this weekend. The reason I bring it up is because they may be in a situation, at least somewhat similar, where they're down their quarterback, potentially. I hope not, but potentially you're down your quarterback. They are still down a couple of skill position players, It doesn't sound like Jazz Patterson's going to be back. It doesn't sound like Terrell Washington's going to play. Sounds like Reese Vanderzee has a shot to be back, which would be huge, but he may still be out. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see, and I hate to tell you this, if you're a Hawkeye fan, you want to see that Iowa offense stay open, and I think it has opened up substantially over the past few weeks. But I think there's a good chance we see very similar game plan to what we saw 2 years ago. Doesn't mean they won't throw the ball downfield because Tim Lester's still the OC. But I think they'll be very, very deliberate, careful with those decisions, those shots. If Mark plays, they'll be more conservative, I believe. You're not going to see them running him 10 to 15 times. I hope they can get back to a point with his health where that's at least on the table. That's the worst thing, is when you're slowed down by an injury. Bring up Cade McNamara 2 years ago. Now, Cade's not the quarterback I believe Mark is, but remember, Cade got hurt in Kids Day in August prior to the season, eventually suffered a season-ending injury, but even prior to that season-ending injury, he was playing, whatever it be, 70%, 80%, and I think that contributed to him getting hurt later on. Now, I can't prove that, but not only are you losing a facet of your weaponry, your scheme, your plan, but you're also playing hurt, which leaves you susceptible to further injury. So I made the comment yesterday before we even got the depth chart and before we heard Kirk today that I would not be shocked, regardless of Mark's availability. It sounds like he's medically cleared to play, but I would not be shocked if Iowa holds him back, not because I believe that they think this is a walkover, but because I believe they think that whoever the quarterback is, the best way to play against this Wisconsin team is as they did 2 years ago. So if we can execute our game plan like we did 2 years ago, it's less important who Iowa trots out at quarterback. Does that make sense, Mark? We'd rather just go, let's give Mark another week of rest. We got Penn State coming to town in a week. Let's just, trot Hank Brown out there or Jeremy Hicklinski. Let them hand the ball off, 35 times. Although, again, I think it's going to be hard to run the ball against this Wisconsin front. But if they can control, I think the biggest question, and I haven't come out in my preview yet, is will Iowa special teams really recover? Because we've talked about that 2 weeks ago. You could argue, week and a half ago, special teams sort of let Iowa down. And I had a live show with Tyler Kluver, Big Grove Brewery on Friday, and we had a great conversation. I need to cut that up and post it on the channel. We had a great conversation about snapping because he's a former long snapper. And he broke down that missed kick by Drew Stevens. Laces were 9 o'clock instead of noon. Shouldn't have mattered. Still is very kickable for Drew Stevens. But Tyler brought out how, that whole, what people don't realize is that whole unit, that whole process, long snapper, a short long snap to the holder spins the ball, tries to get those laces straight out so the kicker can make that field goal. Iowa's made that look easy in large part over recent years. But if you're just a little bit off, whether the snapper's a little bit off timing-wise, he's not consistent with the spin of the ball, or the holder's not able to get those laces, it does disrupt things enough. And I'm not blaming anybody specifically, but the point is special teams has not been as efficient or proficient as it needs to be. If they can, and bye week aside, right? Bye week, you'd hope that LeVar's made some headway with these things, with the long snappers, with the field goal unit. But, frankly, Reese Dakin hasn't been a superstar. I thought he may take a bigger step forward. They haven't needed him as much. But if they can make some improvement here, if they've made some improvement during the bye week, special teams could loom large again in Madison, given the way I believe this game will play out.
The Big Ten Live Show is next with Corey and myself moving over to the main channel here at the Voice of College Football. So again, at 6 p.m. Eastern time, or you don't even need to know the time. As soon as we're done here, just switch over to the main channel. Huge week in the Big Ten. Oregon, Indiana, Ohio State, Illinois, USC, Michigan. I love this slate of games. So we will get to that next hour.
Yeah, and I got some things to say about this past weekend too. So
of course, yes, we had a major shocker, one of the pinnacle upsets in recent college football history, no doubt, in my mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Iowa has not performed traditionally well coming off a bye.
That's what it's. I don't have evidence, like statistical evidence, to back that
That
up,
was
but
going
it
to be
feels
my next.
that.
That was going
I
to be
can
my
give you,
follow-up.
yeah, I can give you anecdotes. I can
Okay.
give you an anecdote from 2021. I believe Iowa was coming off a loss to Purdue, its first loss of the season. Keep in mind they had beaten Penn State when both teams were top 5 in the country. They come back the next week, lose to Purdue, and you're like, what is happening here? It was a Jeff Brom coach team, so Iowa had traditionally struggled against that program, lost to Purdue in 2020 in West Lafayette, but they got throttled by Purdue. And we thought, okay, bye week, time to regroup. They're still in the playoff race with one loss. I mean, we were talking playoffs, right? They were undefeated prior to the Purdue game. They come back and get absolutely mauled in Camp Randall. I mean, could not do anything offensively. That was after a bye week. So that was one of the more profound instances that stand out. And obviously just trips to, I said this preseason, you and some other people, you were kind of downplaying going to Camp Randall just because you kept saying how this is not the same Wisconsin team. It's not the same. And I get that, but 3.5 is only 3.5. And
I know 3.5 points. Goodness.
Well, but preseason, you acted like this shouldn't be a real scary game on the schedule.
Well, I was
But it
basically
always
saying,
is when you go to Camp Randall.
yeah. So again, the way Iowa plays football, almost every game's close, but I can't equate my level of confidence with the final score or the Vegas line when it comes to Iowa. They're a unique case, hopefully less going forward, and I think less now than they were under the likes of Spencer Petras playing quarterback and Brian Ferentz running the offense. But so less egregious on that end of the scale. But yeah, 3.5 points at Wisconsin. So I would love for you to do a bye week breakdown sometime in the off season and go like the last 10 years.
Maybe I can do it. Maybe I can do it this week.
Because you could go through obviously and just lay out the record and people would come to conclusions. But you got to look at, obviously there's a difference going to Columbus off a bye week and going to, Piscataway.
Right.
You'd have to put things in perspective, obviously. But I just know that you've said that. I think that maybe is a byproduct of the way Iowa plays football as well, and the way Kirk is so consistent. And most coaches like to go into the lab during the bye week and figure out, okay, what can we, we've only instituted 80% of the playbook. Let's pull out some gadgets. And sometimes that's a welcome addition to the team. Sometimes it bogs down or confuses people, or they kind of jump ahead and give these guys too much to think about. So there's a fine line there.
Well, and I also think you brought up Brian Ferentz, not to knock him, but there's a different, we don't know yet. I mean, we can look at one season, year one, under Tim Lester, and I've got this up on my screen right now. So last year, Iowa's bye week came, prior to Ohio State, where they lost. But again, it was in the shoe. So, I mean, yeah, they lost, right? 35-7. They lost that game. And then, their second bye week last year came in November prior to Maryland. And that was a game Iowa went on the road and won by double figures with Jackson Stratton as their quarterback. So, yeah, I don't think we learned much of anything from those 2 points of evidence in 2024 under Lester. But my point is different OC. And like you said, I think the way Iowa plays football traditionally under Kirk lends to your point. And the other thing about this, that's kind of why I pointed at special teams. Like I could see that unit, if there's a unit that might benefit the most from a bye week, A, it's whoever can get healthy, but B, it might be LeVar Woods guys, because we have not seen the struggles, those little struggles that have added up and cost Iowa at certain points so far through 5 games, like we have so far this year. So I wouldn't be surprised if on special teams, if that's where we see the most improvement. And that's great if we can see that. Like I say, this game against Wisconsin very well might be determined between the margins, like a lot of Iowa games are. And Indiana was proven between the margins and they lost. So this week, I expect Drew Stevens to kick really well. And I think he'll probably be needed because, again, usually low-scoring game, stingy defense. Wisconsin's got one of the best rush defenses in the country, Mark. I think they're top 5 or 6 in spite of their porous record. And same thing with Reese Dakin. He's got to punt well. Caden Weegen's been pretty consistent, with the exception being week 2 against Iowa State. He really hasn't coughed up the ball. He was just made some poor decisions against Iowa State. But I expect him to play well also. And, hey, the defense played well against Indiana. You can say what you want about Deshaun Lee getting burned on that slant play to one of the Big Ten's best receivers. But I thought play calling was a little bit precarious there. I thought that was a little bit suspect, calling that final blitz by Phil Parker. And he talked about that during the bye week. So I don't put a lot of blame on those corners. I thought those corners, including Deshaun Lee, really showed out. And I don't think people give them enough. I don't think people give people like Deshaun Lee enough credit. Everybody rips the guy when he plays poorly against Rutgers. He comes back against one of the quote unquote best passers in the country, Heisman quarterback, and, all Big Ten receivers, and plays great. And nobody gives him credit. So I think we saw a lot of improvement from Phil Parker's guys just in, without an off week between Rutgers and Indiana. So there may be some substantial improvement there as well. But Wisconsin's going to be dealing with QB 2 or 3 this week. So they're in the same situation as Iowa as far as health at quarterback.
Do you put those accolades by Indiana in quotes because they're false accolades?
They're premature.
Okay.
They're premature and based on very little evidence at Indiana. That's what I base it on.
All right. I won't argue with that. I do think that Fernando Mendoza has been a college quarterback for quite some time now, and we know that he's capable. At least.
But if we're talking about Heisman, we're talking about a whole nother level.
Sure.
And when I hear about Heisman odds that early, and I heard all about it heading into the Iowa game, and he did very, very little against Iowa. And I was just told all week how he was just going to rip through that Iowa defense, and that never happened. So now we'll see. Who does Indiana get this week? Because they're coming off bye as well.
Oregon.
That's right, the Oregon game. So that I'll tell you what, between
a good game.
Yeah, Indiana, Oregon. I think that's in Eugene, correct? I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Yeah. So let's see. Brandon KJ. Let's throw this chat up there. You want to read that, Mark? Read it to the people.
Well, before we get to that, the reason I am displaying the Michigan rush offense, if anyone's wondering, is because it's been asked, and Corey brought up the Wisconsin rush defense. So I am not an expert in Wisconsin football, but lo and behold, I have watched them play 2 football games, start to finish. I watched the Michigan game start to finish last weekend and watched them play Alabama pretty much start to, okay, they've got no chance territory in the 3rd or 4th quarter. And I will say this about Wisconsin. Yes, even before they lost their quarterback, that was not a standout position for them. But, yeah, they played, I can't even think of the guy's name off the top of my head. Hunter Simmons, here he is, 6'3", 220. He was 18 for 29 for $177 against Michigan. He played fairly well. He was okay. He made the throws. He made the easy throws.
He was Jackson Stratton last year against Maryland and Nebraska.
Yeah, against a
better
defense in the country, something in that range. Wisconsin hung with Michigan, more than hung with Michigan. They were in the game. You never felt as though that they would ever win the game, but they hung in the game. Now, in terms of rush defense, that's why I went to Michigan's rushing numbers, because Wisconsin really didn't get challenged by Alabama running the football, surprisingly, because they came into that game number 1 in the country in rush defense. They played Alabama. Well, Alabama was having too much success throwing the ball. They threw for almost 400 yards that they didn't even try to run them. They figured out in the first quarter, their receivers just abused Wisconsin's secondary.
Yeah.
They were just way too good.
Well, one receiver
really good.
One receiver in particular, but yeah.
Oh, they're both
very good.
Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams.
Both
of those guys.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm gathering from you, because I followed that Alabama Wisconsin. I actually listened to that game on the way back from Okoboji, but what I'm gathering from you is perhaps the numbers are a bit fraudulent for Wisconsin, because right now Wisconsin, you look at the stats, just when we're talking breaking things down this early in the season, it's still early. It's 5 games in, and a lot of over half of the sample size for most of these teams are against nobodies.
Yeah.
For a lot of them, because, hey, some of these teams literally played nobody in the non-conference. Wisconsin played Alabama. The reason I bring it up is because Now, who was Wisconsin's other Big Ten opponent?
Maryland.
Maryland. But in Maryland, they don't run the ball well under Loxley. They love to throw it around as the yard, haphazardly. So to your point, perhaps the numbers are a bit fraudulent. Now, if you're Kirk Ferentz, he hyped this team up today. That's what you got to do. You got to show those numbers. And there are other areas to be legitimately concerned. But if you want to feel a little bit better, talk to Mark. But the stats right now say that Wisconsin has the 6th best rush defense in the country. And put that in perspective, they've allowed 375 rush yards on the season, but 175 of those came against against Michigan. So that means against Alabama, Maryland, Miami, Ohio, and
Middle Tennessee,
they totaled 200. Their opponents totaled 200 rush yards total. Those are pretty stellar numbers. But again, context is important, and it's still relatively early. Iowa may go in there and really run the ball well. It sounds like Iowa, that's the one position where I think they've recovered health-wise. Dunker's seen some snaps out this year. Bo Stevens has seen some snaps out this year. But as far as I'm aware, they're all healthy. And that would be the one area, even though they're down Jazz Patterson, Terrell Washington, they got Kamari Moulton, Xavier Williams will be back. Hopefully they run the ball well, and that will probably be enough. If Iowa can total 100 and do what Michigan did, again, 175 yards on the ground, I have a hard time seeing Iowa lose because I think Iowa will make it hard on Wisconsin to run the ball effectively.
In comparing Iowa and Michigan, I would say that Iowa has a slightly better offensive line. Slightly better. Michigan's 2 backs, though. There.
Pro Football Focus here a couple of weeks ago. Did you saw these stats that Coach Patterson and I talked about? Did we talk about the stats that what am I trying to say here? Let me see if I can find them. Pro Football Focus allegedly. I want you to do I really want you. You got all your minions. I want you to send your minions out, and I want you guys to do a full-on investigation into Pro Football Focus and how they hand out player ratings to all these athletes. You have like 135 FBS teams, and if you go on the Pro Football Focus website, they claim that an analyst looks at every player on every snap and gives them a grade for every snap. Now, do you realize how much time that would take? One thing that Don Patterson has said, and I kind of agree with him, he's like, well, nobody's ever reached out to me. I'm a retired offensive coach tight ends, quarterbacks, receivers. No one ever reached out to me to analyze for Pro Football Focus. So who's doing these analyses? I really would like to know, because they had Iowa as of a couple of weeks ago, Mark. I don't know if you saw these stats. I'll try to pull them up. They had all of Iowa's linemen except Jennings Dunker. All of Iowa's linemen, all those 4 on the left, they were all rated as the number 1 at their position in the country. And Jennings Dunker was rated number 2. Now, when I see those types of numbers, I say, you just lost credibility. You just lost credibility and believability. It's not believable anymore. When you do that, I can't wrap my head around. Again, it's not real feasible for me to think that you're evaluating every single lineman at every single position, every single play in the country. All right. I can't imagine Pro Football Focus is that large and powerful. But secondly, you can't convince me that all of those, I was that dominant up front and not producing better run numbers. Right? I don't know.
They're telling us that Iowa has 5 of the top 6 offensive linemen in the country.
And the other one is maybe the 9th or 10th or
yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, but people love that. I can't necessarily disprove it. I just think it's not very believable. I'll try to find that stat and I'll try to find a date on it. But it was
and before we get to this comment here, and before you fill us in on that, I was in on my Wisconsin analysis, which is basically there's little that this football team does well. That front 7, that is, I don't think it's a fraudulent ranking. Maybe to that degree it's fraudulent. They're not that. They are not the a vintage Wisconsin defense front 7s that we've seen under Jim Leonard that were ranking top 5 in the country after playing a Big Ten schedule. So I think that their rush defense is really good, and I think their front seven is really good. I think their offensive line is actually better than I thought it would be because their development's not nearly what it used to be. They've been injured. They've had to shuffle guys all over the place. They didn't have their center last week against Michigan. Their offensive line was a mess against Alabama if you went position by position in terms of experience, injuries. But they don't have weapons on offense. Their secondary is no good. Like, they're not a good football team.
No, I know they're not a good football team. I believe me, I think I was going to go up there and win, but 3.5 just doesn't seem like very much. Real quick, this is the post. This is from Pro Football Focus. Just what did I say? Let's see. Let me get a post date on that. So this is from info. Let's see, September 26th. So like 2 weeks ago. This is straight from their account, right? We can get rid of well, maybe we can't. Here, let me get rid of that comment. I so want to address the comment from KJ, but let's get rid of that first. So yeah, there you see it. Trevor Lauk, they've got him as the number 1 left tackle, or at least as of 2 weeks ago. Had Bo Stevens as the number 1 left guard, Logan Jones number 1 center, Cade Pieper number 1 right guard, Jennings Dunker number 2 right tackle in the country.
Okay.
I mean, how do you react to that? I mean, I shared it with Don Patterson. He said the same thing I did. Like, I just, it's hard to believe, and it just almost doesn't seem like a person could achieve what they're, but people love these ratings. So, yeah. And they've been around for a long time on the pro level. I don't know how long they've been doing the college stuff.
Yeah, it just common sense tells you that it's not reasonable, that it's not feasible for any team. So take whoever you think is the best team in the country at any position. Would they have the 2 best linebackers in the country, or the 3 best the 2 best linebackers in the country and the 4th best linebacker in the country? Or,
what if we found out that what if we found out that the analysts that Pro Football Focus uses, the analysts they use for their offensive lines were James Ferentz, Brian Ferentz, and and Steve Ferentz. Hey, they all played offensive line at the college level. Let's just hire them to grade out all the old linemen. That would almost make more sense than this. But hey, if they're this good, they got to go out and run the ball down their throats on Saturday. They got to do this every week if they're this dominant.
Yeah, they should.
And they didn't do that against Indiana. They weren't ineffective, but they weren't great against Indiana on the ground. So, I'm just intrigued to see how they run the ball on the road. And I would think Wisconsin, that's the one thing, if you don't have Gronowski in there, Mark, you can probably speak to this because you watch a lot of college football. When a team is missing their starting quarterback, it affects more than just the passing game. In this case, I think it's going to allow Wisconsin to cheat up even more, because why would you respect Hecklinski or Hank Brown's ability to throw over the top and open up the offense? So if I was Wisconsin, I would load up to stop that run until Lester and that offense can prove that A, they can protect a more immobile quarterback, likely Hank Brown, and B, he can get those receivers the ball and throw them open. Because it took some time for Mark Gronowski to begin doing that, and he starts to do that and he gets hurt. So let's just hope Mark plays, because if Mark plays, even just having his arm, even if he's not as mobile, just having his arm is a big plus. I just want to see him healthy to the guy that we have seen to this point. I don't want to see him come back as a shell of himself. So I'm in favor if they think that, hey, if we give him one more week, we think we can get him back to maybe to where he was. But if we play him this week, it may just be touch and go. I'm not the one making those decisions, and I don't get to pay the big bucks to do so. But I would probably lean towards playing a backup quarterback and saying, let's just run the ball, field position, win how we know how to win, and let's get out of there. Even if it is another 15-6 slugfest. So we'll see. Vanderzee's supposed to be back, by the way, Mark. So that's one more weapon for whoever is playing quarterback.
Brandon KG. Corey thinking they have a playoff chance is always funny and beyond delusional.
I love you, Brandon. Thanks for being here. It's just, I love it. How would you respond to that comment, Mark?
I would respond it this way. I've known Corey for a long time. We've done 216 shows here and others. We're probably pushing 300 shows in some fashion and private conversations. And Corey is simply pointing out that logistically, technically, Iowa has a playoff chance, an opportunity based on the sheer numbers. He didn't make any kind of projection as to what those chances are, but just simply that Iowa has a playoff chance.
It's incredibly unfortunate they lost to Indiana. I think we can all agree on that. It's incredibly unfortunate that they've lost 2 games, both of which would have been really good wins by the slimmest of margins. And now instead you're backs up against the wall. I will say Penn State looks more winnable now. I'm not saying that they're going to win. I could see Penn State coming into Kinnick and winning. Sure. I think people are overreacting to their loss to UCLA. We'll talk about that next hour, I'm sure. But so this game this week is winnable. Penn State's winnable. At USC is winnable. Nothing saying they're going to win, but it's winnable. At Nebraska is winnable. Michigan State at home is winnable. Minnesota's winnable. I don't know about Oregon, but it isn't Kinnick. So that's what I'm just saying. Almost every game you could argue is winnable. To win them all is going to be a massive task. So I totally not saying that they're going to. Their chances of making the playoff are maybe 2%, but they're not 0. I guess that's the point I'm pointing out here. There's still plenty to watch for. Plenty of reason to watch.
Our friends at ESPN has some type of percentage on everyone. So I don't know what they have calculated that to be. And Oregon needed overtime in Happy Valley to win that game. It wasn't like they went in there and just steamrolled.
It's hard to win on the road. I mean, just ask Penn State. It's hard to win on the road. And, Oregon's going to be coming off actually, I don't know who they play the week prior. I was thinking Penn State. They'll be coming off hopefully a bounce back. I hope they bounce back against them. The worst thing is if they go to Northwestern and struggle, in my opinion. Because at some point you'd think talent's going to win out and the ball's going to drop. I would almost prefer them gather back everybody's attention with an impressive victory before they come to Kinnick. But
I think they're a different sort. I think possibly they're a different sort. We had our buddy Marty Leap on our show last night where this could be a tipping point when your talent level's that high, your expectations are that high, when so many players have come back to win a national championship, and that's the focus. And then now why they looked like they sleptwalked in LA, I don't know. That was his thought, that they looked like they weren't even trying, especially on defense. I don't know. I didn't watch the game start to finish or anything, but I can't speak to, I didn't see guys obviously not trying, giving effort. But right. I think there's the chance of a tipping point where the season just falls apart, and it doesn't matter how much talent they have if they're not.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen after 2 losses. That could happen after 8. If they lose to Northwestern, great. That's actually probably a good thing. But they're not going to lose to Northwestern. I would be shocked if that happens. Although I was shocked this past weekend. So
sure, everyone was.
Yeah, I mean, if they were to lose to Northwestern, does James Franklin get fired during the season, Mark?
He might.
You think so?
They've got to come up with $54 million.
Yeah, they're not firing him. There'd be too many excuses not to, especially with that type of a buyout.
But I guess the buyout can be paid out
over a
long period of time.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, man. Whew. Everybody complaining about having to pay Chris Doyle $1 million to get him out of Dodge, and times that by 54. So hey, real quick before we continue, want to make a special. This is always an opportunity. This show is like my announcement show because like we
Great.
always are able to preview stuff later in the week on this show because I don't have any live. I usually don't have live content during the week. Sometimes we'll do a Hawkeye hangout, but special announcement, lots of cool stuff coming. But starting this weekend, we will be joined by not only Coach Don Patterson, but also by former Hawkeye second team All Big Ten defensive lineman and New York Jet Matt Kroll. Matt is an integral part of one of our new partners, Farms of America, and that awesome docuseries that's been broadcast and is available on a number of different platforms. So he's going to join us to break down the game, talk about what he's done since retiring from football. He briefly made a switch when he got signed to the New York Jets roster. He briefly actually switched him over. You may not know this, Mark. They switched him over to the offensive side of the ball, had him play on the inside of the offensive line, and basically came back and started farming, and he's turned into an unbelievable story there in Eastern Iowa. So Matt's an awesome dude. We're going to have him and Coach Patterson both for a number of our shows the rest of the season. So it's going to be fun. We're going to enjoy the different perspective. And Don and Matt come from totally different places because, you know, one coached at Iowa, one played at Iowa, but I don't believe I know I've talked to Matt or to both of them last night. Neither have met each other because Don was coaching at Western Illinois when Matt was playing at Iowa and so forth. So this will be a fun collaboration.
Very cool. We've got a super chat coming in from Erica, who says the new American dream is to be a fired college football coach. Get fired, do nothing, get paid millions, or sit on your butt. I blame the schools for some of this because I don't know how many times there has been a situation where somebody had a decent season. Let's say he's a brand new head coach at said university, has a decent year, contract extension. Well, the guy's already got a 4-year contract extension, give him another 3. He's already tacked on. And then year 2, he sucks. Year 3, he sucks. And they're caught in this buyout situation. Happens all the time.
Isn't a perfect example what happened with Mel Tucker at Michigan State?
Yes.
They threw all kinds of money at him because had a really solid first year. And then you have, it's okay. And then, you have the scandal and, performance was slipping and just all of that. So that's when there's this kind of money being thrown around, hard to be smart with your money or if you're the higher ups.
And especially in the days prior to the transfer portal, I understand the schools wanting to secure the coach because of negative recruiting. Okay, this is the last year on his contract. He may not be around, and wanting to, put that security there for the recruiting aspect of it. So it's tricky.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else from Kirk's press conference today. I didn't have anything else written down that was of note. I mentioned the injuries. It looks like they're going to get Xavier Williams back this week. Vanderzee's probably. And now Kirk did say that he does not expect Vanderzee to light the world on fire in his first game back. And then still missing Jazz Patterson, still missing Terrell Washington. And then they will also be down Jaden Harrell at middle linebacker. That might be the one that we've not talked about enough because he's, that spot is obviously instrumental to what Phil Parker does on defense. So Jaden Montgomery, who played last 2 weeks ago, and I thought I'm trying to think of the exact play, but he laid a big hit. I think his first play inserted for Jaden Harrell. He laid a huge hit on Mr. Fernando Mendoza, and Mendoza still hit his receiver. I don't remember which play that was, but Montgomery executed the blitz well. So we'll see, though. He's an undersized linebacker. He's been in the program a long time. He's been patient. He's waited his turn. And these are the cool stories, Mark. If he can emerge and be, some at least some level of help to them. He's been good on special teams during his career, but now his name's being called to play maybe the most important position on defense. It's going to be an interesting storyline this week. But assignment-wise, you would think this is probably not a bad place to start because I don't think Wisconsin's going to be able to. Again, their run game looked better last week. What they finished with against Michigan on the ground, they had total rush yards. They had 107. No, excuse me. Oh, I only
75.
had 75. Excuse the train. I got my window open here.
So
75. So they
yeah.
were not actually as good as I was thinking they were.
So again, I watched this game. First drive of the game was beautiful on Wisconsin's part. 75 yards, 12 plays, ran the ball. Dylan Jones, his first 10 carries, 51 yards. Last 7 carries, 12 yards. Nobody else ran the ball. Obviously, again, we got to weed through the sack statistic with rushing yards, which I hate. So Michigan had, well, they only had 1 sack. So let's say that was an 8-yard sack or something. So yeah, they didn't run the ball. 27 carries for 85 yards.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So should not be this should be a good experience for Jaden Montgomery to get his feet under him. It will be on the road. And my guess is he's going to have quite, I would assume, that he'll have quite the entourage of people there to watch him up in Madison, because his dad, and I don't know what the Packers schedule is right now, but I believe his dad is his dad still on the Packers staff? Maybe he's not. I'll have to look this up, but yeah, he's from Wisconsin. I mean, because his dad was coaching there. I think I know he went to high school in Wisconsin, so he should have. That's a cool story when a kid can go home and get his first career start back in his home state.
Wisconsin's not going to be able to score in this game.
Well, that's what somebody in the chat said earlier. Like, how's Wisconsin going to score points? If that's the case, then Iowa will have no problems. Unless Iowa, I mean, so you're telling me, sounds like you're saying you don't believe Iowa's going to lose this game unless they beat themselves, just with stupidity. Because I agree. It's hard for me to imagine a scenario where I can't imagine, like, they don't have the wideouts. They don't have the wideouts that Rutgers has. They don't have the wideouts that Indiana has. They don't have the weapons that Iowa State has. They also don't have a quarterback to get those wideouts the ball. They might be decent at tight end. I don't know. They usually are good at tight end. But in general, they don't have weapons. And then, yeah, like, they don't have the running. Who's their tailback? I don't even know who their tailback is.
Dylan Rose, is that his last name? I watched him for 3 hours the other day, but I can't remember. Dylan Jones.
I mean, they've went from being every year having studs on the 1 line, the 2 line, the 3 line, to they got nobody. It's a shame, And even under Paul Christ, people, it's kind of like the Bo Pelini thing. People don't realize what they have until it's gone. I'm not saying that applies everywhere, because I've been also an advocate for, at times, it's time for a change. I thought it was maybe time for a change when they had the opportunity to get Luke Fickell there. I, in my own blindness, thought that's a good fit. But now in hindsight, I don't think it is a good fit. I think you would probably agree with that. But we didn't know until it played out. And I have a hard time seeing him work his way back from where he's at now. I think he's done. I'm actually surprised they didn't fire him during the bye week. They'll probably let this play out and then fire him in December.
Yeah, I think at this point he's done. And I still think he's a good coach, just not a good fit, apparently. And I did think that this was I ranked either this to be the best coaching hire of the offseason or Matt Rule to Nebraska. 1, 2, 2, 1, however I had that ranked. Excuse me, at the time. Okay. Let me ask you this before we shuffle off.
I was just going to say real quick, Jerry Montgomery is no longer with the Packers. His dad is the D-line coach for the Bengals. So, own question there. But, yeah, he and Jerry Montgomery was played at Iowa as well. So, Jaden, of course, is a legacy kid. And just to confirm, Jaden is from Suamico, Wisconsin. Went to Bayport High School. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I don't know how far. You want to guess how far Suamico is to Madison?
Well, the state of Wisconsin's pretty large. I got to think that top to bottom, it's like a 5-hour drive.
So I think Suamico must be pretty close to Green Bay. So it's about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
To Madison. So I'm sure he'll have plenty of friends or family, even though Jerry's coaching in Cincinnati now.
Let me ask you this. So I mentioned in ushering the show off the top that this is one of the designated rivalry games in the Big Ten that's protected every year. Iowa has 3 of these. There's only about 10 in the entire conference, 10 or 12. Iowa has 3. Iowa may be the only school with 3. Minnesota's got Wisconsin, Iowa. I think those are the only 2 that they have. So anyway, I think that Iowa is the only team that has 3 protected rivalries. So
Yes.
How would you rank the intensity, the importance of the Minnesota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin games, or the hatred in a sports context from the fan bases?
Well, I think it's changing for the first time in a long time. I think it's changing just because Wisconsin had been, especially with the layouts of the divisions. Minnesota had a chance to be that, but as you and I have talked about, as much as you love PJ, they could never be a player in that poor Big Ten West. So sort of sad.
I don't know
But
if they were a player. They didn't
never
get to the conference championship game.
The best they could do was beat Wisconsin so that Iowa could go. So that's just my point is it was always Wisconsin that was in between Iowa and going to Indy. And so and even before the layout, I mean, briefly, Wisconsin was on the other side of that, right? They were in the legends or leaders,
which.
Hey, listen, what a stupid concept. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, we can because we lived through it, but legends and leaders. I'm sorry.
If they would have stayed, that's a good video right there. I'm going to do that in the off season. If they would have stayed with those divisions, how would that have changed? Yeah.
I don't know why. Well, yeah, the name concept is what I have an issue with. But yeah, Wisconsin has been that team for so long now that to me, that's the most important rivalry or has been. Minnesota has the most history. And I think if you ask people up in Minnesota, they care a lot more about beating Iowa than Iowa cares about beating them. You hear the "we hate Iowa" chants when you go to Minnesota events. I mean, Iowa fan, I don't think the student section ever does that for Minnesota when they come to town. But I think Nebraska has the potential for being the biggest, even though it's the newest, sort of, right? Sort of the newest. It goes back a lot longer than, Nebraska joining the Big Ten of late. But I think just given what they have at their disposal, NIL-wise, and I'm guessing revenue share-wise, just what they put into football, I think a lot of teams are putting similar amounts into football, but in addition to NIL and just recruiting abilities there, I mean, I still think Iowa State's Iowa's biggest rival. But as far as conference is concerned, yeah, I would probably right now say that Nebraska's number 1 just because of where Wisconsin's at. And Minnesota might be right there with Wisconsin. And Minnesota's not very good. I mean, they just aren't very good. You and I have had several discussions. Nobody has gotten beaten by Ohio State worse this year than Minnesota did this past week, with the exception being your favorite school, Grambling State. Nobody has gotten beat down the way Minnesota did.
Don't be surprised if somebody does.
Well, maybe that's true. But I saw Washington at least challenge Ohio State for a while. I saw Texas play real close, and Texas doesn't look like they're very good right now. Do you think Texas is very good right now?
Well, it depends. Are they Texas good, national championship good? Obviously not.
Okay.
If they suddenly came into the Big Ten and teams had to play them every week, I don't think anybody wants to play Texas.
Nobody wants to play them, just like nobody wants to play Ohio State, but nobody also wants to play Penn State or Oregon or USC. I'm just saying to this point, Ohio State's not been as dominant as I expected them to be, but man, they just thrashed the Gophers. And I will say it will be interesting to see what happens when Minnesota comes to Iowa, because that game has, even though Iowa has owned that series for the most part, it's been they've been kind of like the Iowa State series. It's been a series of close games. And I just don't know. I haven't watched a ton of Minnesota this year. What did I watch this past weekend that, we're going to talk about it on the Big Ten show. I guess I'll save that.
Erica, closing us out. Thank you for this, Erica. We have the 3 Big Ten rivals and Iowa State. Way too many. A third of our schedule is predetermined every year. I hate it.
Well, so I'm curious, and I have no issue with her opinion, but I'd like to know, okay, what games do you want to not protect? What games do you don't want to? I mean, because like I kind of agree with you. It makes the schedule more boring, and I wish there was, like, in a sense, I don't love the fact that Iowa has that, because it just creates less equality across the league. But the league should be able to adjust for that, and that comes back to scheduling and when schedules are released and all that. But I just don't know who you're going to get rid of. Minnesota's too deep of a rivalry. There's too much, like I said, between Nebraska and Iowa fans. That's not going anywhere. Maybe get rid of Wisconsin. I mean, I don't know. There's a trophy there.
Erica would have to answer this, but does she want to see Maryland more or Northwestern, or does she want to see Ohio State or Michigan more?
Yeah.
Who do you want to see? Because it's either going to get extremely difficult if you replace those, or they're just going to be like these nothing games that nobody cares about.
I think we should be, personally, I think we ought to be thankful that these are the teams that Iowa has had rivalries with, because not that they've been crap. Nebraska's had years of being crap, but like Iowa's owned Nebraska, they've owned Minnesota, and here of late, last 4 years, they've owned Wisconsin. Now Iowa State's last 4 years has owned Iowa, right? They've won 3 of the last 4, but I just don't know. I just don't know who you're going to get rid of there. I know some people who have said for a long time they'd like Iowa State to go bye-bye, but that's a real healthy program right now with Matt Campbell. And I know they lost this past weekend, but I love that game.
Yeah. And you know my take on that. It has nothing to do with the rivalry. That I like the rivalry. I think it should be played. It's just that because there's only 3 non-conference games, it boxes Iowa into a situation where that's the only major team they're going to play outside the conference. So we never see Iowa go out and schedule some of the games that we see across the conference.
Part of me would almost rather Iowa and the league as a whole just go to a format where you do go back to 8 games in the conference, and it gives you an opportunity to schedule a second non-conference. I mean, I don't know that that's, from a logistics and competitive standpoint, good for the league, but I kind of do miss being able to see Pitt or Arizona State, and I'd like to see them schedule, better teams like, I was going to say Washington, they're in the league now, like a Florida or like a South Carolina or a Syracuse, and they played Syracuse, had a home and home with Syracuse. Remember the goal line stand against Syracuse back in 2007, Mark?
No, I do not. I do not remember them playing Syracuse. And
yes.
I'm shocked that when you're thinking of who they could possibly play across the country, and you're thinking of somebody good, you're thinking of Syracuse.
Get off your high horse, Mark. Your old buddy from Ohio State went to Syracuse and put up ridiculous numbers. Now, where is he now? Where is
Kyle McCord.
Where's McCord now? Is he playing in the league?
He was drafted. I don't know what he's doing.
Okay. All right.
Corey's going to look that up, and we are going over to the main channel to fire up the Big Ten live show. So we're going to talk all the big games coming up this week. One more super chat. Erica, thank you so much for this. Iowa State and Minnie can go bye-bye. All right.
So
we're going bye-bye. We'll see you over on the Big Ten live show.